This is Open Parley Live. 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 This is Open Parley. This is Open Parley Live. This is Open Parley Live. This is Open.
Hello and a warm welcome to Open Parley Live here on Open Parley. My name is Lynette Manzini. Thank you very much for joining us. In today's conversation, we talk about the 2025 national budget. We talk about the missing GDP figures. You got it right. Zimbabwe's GDP figures, that's the gross domestic product figures, are missing. And also we want to talk about the nose diving ZiG. That's the the new currency that was introduced in April. And helping me to discuss this topic is the Mbizo constituency MP, Honorable Koban Madzivanyika, who is also the CCC, that's the Citizens Coalition for Change, Shadow Finance Minister. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Lynette.
Thank you very much. Some interesting times that were in Honorable, where a whole delegation of the Ministry of Finance appears before Parliament, and then you ask them a simple question: what is the GDP of the country? And I remember in that video clip, you went on to say, can we have it in US dollars? When they failed to give you this this GDP figure, what was your impression?
Yeah, thank you, Lynette. It is so worrying to the very large extent that a war director from the Ministry of Finance could not tell with certainty the value of the country's gross domestic product. What is it in the first place? The gross domestic product represents the total value of goods and services which are produced in a particular country per year. So it's not that the figures were missing. I think the figures were misleading. Mm-hmm. You realize that they indicated that the gross domestic product in real terms is 96 million. How can you have 96 million US dollar gross domestic product? It doesn't make sense. While as a country we've got billions and billions. So it doesn't make sense. Actually, it shows the highest level of incompetence at the Ministry of Finance. I am sure that's why we're having all these challenges that we're having in this country. It's just because the people that we have who are presiding over the public financial management issues of this country are very incompetent.
They're very incompetent. So you say that the figures that they've been giving us are misleading.
They are misleading.
But now, for the benefit of those who don't understand, why were you as the MP requesting for this GDP, and why was that so important? Because you were talking about what they were planning in 2025.
Yeah, that is very important. The GDP figure, it shows whether the country is growing or not. Mm-hmm. Let me put things into perspective. When we say the GDP has grown, we are saying, for example, last year in mining, we actually, for example, in terms of gold, if we produce 10 tons of gold last year, and this year we produce 12 tons, it means the country is growing in the mining sector. And if that happens to all other sectors of the economy, manufacturing, in terms of tourism, in terms of agriculture, if that happens across the latitude of all sectors of the economy, then it means there is what we call growth in the economy. It is a very important figure because whenever an economy is growing, it implies that the people are being employed. It implies that we are producing more, and a lot of improvements in the standards of living of the generality of our citizens.
Yes. Now, what maybe also is worrisome is I think towards as they were preparing for the 2024 budget, that was in 2023, yes, they highlighted that they were looking at a growth rate of about 3.5%, but that has since been reduced to about 2% at this particular year. What does this mean? If growth rate is decreasing, what does this do to our GDP, and how does this affect the ordinary citizen?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the main reason, according to them, why there will be a slowdown in terms of growth is the poor performance of the agriculture sector, because we did not receive average rainfall this year. So they normally say the El Nino, what you call the El Nino effect, the El Nino phenomenon. They always say that. So what it means is that the growth rates are down. It means companies are downsizing. It means the living standards are down. The incomes of people generally are going down. That is what exactly it means.
But
yes,
in your response, you say that is what they say. Yes. They say it's El Nino. Yes. You seem, that gives me an impression, yes, that you don't believe them.
That is very correct, because when people make these projections about the growth of domestic product, to say that we are going to have a 3.5% growth, it's a projection, what they expect to achieve in 2024. So those projections, they are underlying assumptions. They were aware when they made those projections to the effect that Zimbabwe has been affected by the El Nino phenomenon. So when they actually introduced to say we are going to have a 3.5% growth rate, they were aware of those conditions. So for me to come back and say it's because of the El Nino again, it doesn't make sense for me. It shows that the projections, the research team did not do its work properly.
So in case you're just joining us, you are tuned into Open Pali Live here on Open Pali. My name is Lynette Manzini, and if you have a question, a comment, please go ahead into our comment section and ask the Honorable a question, or give us your comment in regards to the GDP figure. So that's the gross domestic product. So the Ministry of Finance appeared, those are the officials, he also alluded that the director was there, appeared before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Public Accounts Committee, and they failed to give the GDP figures of the country, which was quite alarming, and the Honorable has bemoaned that they were giving them misleading figures. They had said that the GDP was 96 million, of which he disputed, and I'm sure, Honorable, they say that they're going to come back again with the actual figures.
That is correct.
With the actual, how will you know that these are the actual figures?
Actually, for record, they come again yesterday, and they reiterated that the GDP is 96 million, the real GDP. And I was so confused, to the extent that when the members of parliament were continuing to seek clarifications from the delegation, they actually had to protect it by the chair to say, can we park that issue for now? Because this is on public record. This is exactly what transpired. So the cluelessness continues.
So you're saying they're clueless, but to what extent does this affect our economy if they give us misleading GDP figures?
That is correct. I think what is important to understand is when a wrong GDP is a very fundamental statistic in economics. It is the statistic upon which more comparisons can be made. We can compare our revenue to generation to GDP ratio. We can compare our current account deficit to GDP. We can also compare our debt to GDP. We can compare many things are normally compared to the GDP. So the idea of giving a false GDP has got implications on the debt to GDP ratio, for example. In terms of the Public Debt Management Act, Zimbabwe is limited to borrow to the tune of 70% of GDP. So if someone wants to give a misleading GDP, it means they are going to also mislead the people on the limitations that they are given by the law. So it's very important to have a correct figure for GDP.
So
yes.
So what you're simply saying is, if we don't have the right GDP, then government officials can go ahead and borrow above the stipulated 70%, and the citizens will never know.
That is exactly what.
And then we will be just paying back this debt all our lives.
That is very correct.
And but don't you think that maybe the ministry officials are, in between a hard place and a rock? I'm asking this because we always change our currency, and there's inflation involved there as well. It doesn't not, as an economist, isn't this difficult to calculate? And also considering that we're in a multi-currency system.
Okay, I think what is important, Lynette, is to understand the position of the law when it comes to a situation whereby we're using a multi-currency system. In terms of the budgets, for example, a government has adopted what we call IPSAS. IPSAS just simply means the International Public Sector Accounting Standard. So those international public sector accounting standards, they give a set of values or a set of regulations upon which the government should adhere to in terms of public sector accounting. If you look at IPSAS number 24, it actually says a country, a nation must actually peg its national budget in the currency which is dominant. And in this case for Zimbabwe, it's on record. The governor has been saying that we are 85% dollarized. Right now, we are now 80% dollarized. What it implies that the US dollar is the dominant currency. And for that matter, it must be used as a currency in the national budget statistics. Why? It is important. Number one, we can easily check the budget to say how far is it gone, how far have we disbursed. But under the current circumstances, if you say you give 2 trillion to a Minister of Health, for example, it doesn't make sense after 8 months. Look at the recent devaluation, a jump of almost 44% devaluation of the currency. What does it imply to the allocation that was made to the Minister of Finance? What does it imply to the allocation made to the Minister of Industry? So it means those ministries are going to be shortchanged somewhere, somehow, because of this situation. So I implore government to correct this situation, to ensure that they put their national budget in US dollar terms. If they want to insist on the ZiG, they should also have an alternative budget in US dollars, so that we know how much has been disbursed in US dollars. It's also easy for accountants. Imagine, I am trying to think how accountants live in this country, because everything changed. The financial settlements are meaningless in ZiG.
I'm even worrying for them right now to say how do they even calculate these things. But then there's you raise all these important issues, and you're imploring government. But then there's a school of thought that suggests that MPs in Parliament are actually toothless. How do you, to what extent do you think that these issues you are raising will be taken up by government?
Yeah, there's one that I want you to understand, Lynette. Parliament works on numbers. No matter how brilliant you are, we raise these issues on a day-to-day basis in Parliament. But as much as we raise them, the other colleagues from ZANU-PF can be easily whipped to say, accept this, please accept this. So at the end of the day, it's a matter of voting. Let me give you an example. We fought tirelessly and toothlessly about the issue of transit management in the finance bill recently, to say importers are expected to pay duty at the point of entry, and they are going to be for fuel, yes, and they are going to be reimbursed at the port of exit. So we fought that abuse, to say the abuse is not consistent with international treaties and so forth. But you know what happened? The following day, in the first instance, we were agreeing, but the following day they were whipped. The ZANU-PF, and they all agreed to it. But look at the consequences now. Zimbabwe is no longer receiving. Most trucks are going through Zimbabwe when they are empty. But when they come back, they avoid Zimbabwe. They use Botswana, they use, So we are losing largely as a result of that. So sometimes it's about, as much as we raise important issues, and we are going to continue to raise them. But the issue of numbers is very important. The party with the 2/3 majority will always see the end of the day.
So because you're outnumbered,
yes,
then those suggestions that you have and the ideas that you have can never be effected.
Yeah, in some instances they take them on board. Some of them have been taken on board, which is a positive. But those political ones, they will actually try by all means. Look at the PVO bill. We fought hard against its enactment, but we came to the point of voting to say, let's divide the House. But because of our numbers, but we fought very hard because I think we were around, the opposition was around 58, and the ZANU-PF on that day, they were around 65. So it was a tightly contested thing. It actually showed that we did not agree to that enactment, which is actually, in our case, draconian.
But at the end of the day, the ones with the numbers,
that is very correct.
Their decision takes the day. I want us to move over to the issue of the ZiG.
Yes.
This was introduced late April, alongside the introduction of the new governor, and they said it was gold backed, but a couple of months later, 6 months later, and when they introduced it was 1:14 against the US dollar. But now, officially, it's 1:25. And on the black market, I will just say 40, but it's, the prices vary depending on where you are and how much you have. What is your reflection of what has just happened in the past 6 months? It's gold backed. It will not depreciate, but look at where we are now.
There is a lot that I can say about ZiG. Unfortunately, the bulk of it is negative. First things first, we have introduced many currencies before, and they failed. They say beaten once, twice you must shine. But these people are not shining at all. We are actually put into the vicious cycle of losses because due to currency exchange rate losses. Look, the first lie that was peddled by this government in terms of the ZiG was to say that the ZiG was backed by gold. That's a very big lie. Actually, backing a currency is difficult. Because when we say a currency is backed, let me be very clear with that one. We actually say, if you don't believe the currency or the paper itself, you should look at the asset which is backing the currency. Actually, in countries which backed the currency, we'll be expecting to see the gold bars available. To say if you are in doubt, you go in the exchange. We say the currency is backed by US dollars. But look, we don't even have a Peru to change. To say if I want to buy fuel, which is still in US dollars, I have to go. Where should I get the US dollars? Where do I get the majority of people who are car owners? Where do they get the US dollars? Definitely, they have to find the US dollar somewhere. So to say that it was backed by gold is not correct, because if you go to a bank right now looking with your ZiG, if it is a currency, why should it be difficult for me to get into a bank and get the US dollar that I want to use, the small amount that I want to use for my day-to-day work? So the biggest lie is that the currency is backed. The second lie again is that the willing buyer, willing seller will work. That's a lie. They lie that the market force of demand and supply will determine the exchange rate. It's a lie. When the currency was introduced, it was pegged at 1:14. And actually, it was said to be backed by gold. They said the value of the initial exchange rate was pegged to the price of gold. They actually said our first price was going to be tied to 1 milligram of gold. So it is true that they lied. That is going to be backed by gold, and they actually said the subsequent exchange rate is going to be determined by inflation differentials between the ZiG and the US, as well as the value of gold, which is a lie. So they also, when I say that, they also lied in terms of the willing buyer, willing seller. Look at what they did on the 27th of September. They actually they moved the exchange rate from 14 where it was pegged to a staggering 2024. What does it mean, therefore? It means that they've actually raised. It's not that there's no depreciation of that kind. So it's a big lie that the exchange rate was willing buyer, willing seller. It was backed by gold. All those are lies. So these people, they actually create a vicious cycle of confidence crisis. No one will honestly believe in this government, which says today, assume that I'm a business person. I've been selling out, and I'm in business of a trading business. And then in my business of trade, I sold goods at an exchange rate of 14, for example, pricing my goods at the exchange rate. Then the next day, I'm told that the rate is not 28. How am I going to restock? That's number one. Number two, who is going to compensate me for the exchange rate losses? Yes, those are fundamental questions that must be asked by this government. When they raise, who is going to compensate for the exchange rate losses? So in future, I no longer trust this government because they can change anytime. And for that matter, what I'm going to do, I'm always going to price my goods higher at a higher exchange rate in anticipation that the exchange rate will be raised again.
Or the currency might.
The currency might depreciate again. So I actually try to hedge myself. So when I try to hedge myself against the incidence of future depreciation, I am told that I'm an economic saboteur. You must be arrested. You are an economic saboteur. You are not supporting the government. Honestly, it is the government which is not supporting the business community. It is the government which is not supporting salary workers. Look, if I'm an employee, a civil servant for that matter, yesterday, when the rate was 14, I could be able to buy so much of goods with that little peanut that I get from government. But the next day, with that same money sitting in my account, I have lost purchasing power. What does that mean then? It actually indicates that this government is not consistent. And the inconsistent policies actually brings a situation whereby people don't trust the government. And the crisis of confidence continues. And I want to assure you, I beg with my last cent, no one will trust government pronouncements with regards to currency, because we've heard enough. We've heard enough of this.
And we also see it in the economy. I mean, look at the supermarkets that sell groceries. You look at Pick and Pay. You know, the one, I think it's Along Speak, has shut down. You know, you've got Food Lovers. These are supermarkets that have been selling with the local currency and now have shut down. And the ones remaining are pegging their prices a bit higher or in US dollars. Yet the civil servants you referred to, their incomes have not increased. Yet the currency continues to devalue. And that's why you're suggesting that people won't trust the government. But what about acceptability? I attended one event where the permanent minister, permanent secretary, of the Minister of Finance said that the ZiG was really is being appreciated, accepted in the market. You know, that's a ministry's perspective. But what have you seen as an honorable member?
I have to be very blunt. It's important to tell the truth. The functions and the characteristics, the fundamental characteristics of a robust currency. Number one, like you have said, is acceptability. If we agree that a piece of paper is currency, and if we accept it as a currency, it becomes a currency. So, if the government itself have actually demonstrated that they don't want the ZiG themselves,
how have they done so?
Because they've actually ring-fenced its use to exclusively to other areas, and it did not do so for other areas. For example, if you trust that this currency is genuine, then why doesn't it need to pay for fuel? Why? Why doesn't it pay for passports? How can you tell the nation that we had an agreement with this company which offers passports so that they were supposed to be exclusively charging in US dollars? Why can't you as a government subsidize and allow your people to pay in US dollars? If you are genuine to the effect that this currency works, come into the shops. Let me be honest with you, Lynette. Every business person who is honest to sell by the standards of the interbank exchange offered by government will broke. So it is very true. Those companies, I feel very pity for them because they were too honest enough to the point that they actually lost all the capital to the extent of closing shop. So most businesses that we are seeing in Zimbabwe, let me be very honest, they are not honest. That's why they are existing. They are not abiding by the interbank exchange because the interbank exchange leads to losses. And in the majority of shops, some of the shops, they are now denying the use of the ZiG because it doesn't maintain its value. No one will be happy to say, I'm keeping my wealth in ZiG at the bank. I'm keeping my wealth in my house in ZiG. No one is happy to pay that. That's it.
We have spoken at length about the private sector. Let's look at the public sector. Yes. How does this devaluation affect the public sector, especially when key figures such as the GDP are misleading or unknown?
Yeah, it's very important because you know what happens in the public sector? Largely is the issue of public sector contracts. Because what happens, government rolls out these programs to say, this ministry will say, we want to have these programs. So they actually make tenders to say who is going to, who can get this contract to offer or support this. So what then happens is, if they denominate their contract in ZiG, for example, on the 20th of September, if there was an agreement between the Ministry of Education, for example, and any other company to supply something or to construct something, what therefore it means is that on the 27th of April, the value has actually changed because of devaluation. And as such, it means there's this idea of revising the contract. So we put ourselves in the vicious cycle of continuously revising contracts, because it's no longer meaningless. It has lost its value. It cannot be pursued under the circumstances. So the effects have got a far-reaching consequence even in the public sector. No one wants to supply government now, because people are aware that the government will not pay. Number one, it will pay late. Number two, it doesn't pay the correct rate. So no one will actually put himself in the loss-making position.
And the social safety net?
I'm so concerned about our pensioners. So we've got many people who worked for this country for years and years. And when they were actually subscribing to their pension, they were saying, when I'm old, when I've retired, I will enjoy what I've saved. But all their life savings were washed away in 2008. They were also washed away again in 2019. They are now being washed away again by this devaluation. So to me, the pensioners are the worst affected people in this country. And I implore to the current government to please, and I say please, look at the welfare of our pensioners. Most of them, they will be dying under abject poverty. They are living in extreme poverty, and their situation is so bad. Yet they are the ones who made Zimbabwe great at that time. Yes.
And let's move on to the issue of the national budget. That's the 2025 national budget. I think they were as Parliament, you have been to various provinces, to the 10 provinces, soliciting issues that the public, that the citizens want addressed within these budgets. But my first question, because I want to tie the GDP, the missing GDP figure, the misleading GDP figure. What are the implications of this misleading GDP figure? If you say 96 million is not the accurate GDP figure, but then the ministry works on a budget using this GDP, how does that affect the ordinary citizen in the street?
Yeah, I think what is important, Lynette, is what people prioritize in this national government budget. People were prioritizing health, of course. People were prioritizing education. People were prioritizing the issue of drought, that is social protection. Those are the main issues that came from the people. People were prioritizing infrastructure, the issue of electricity, the issue of roads, the air, rail. They were prioritizing those main issues. But then what then happens is on the ground, when they say what they want, the ministry will accept as usual to say, we're going to give so much to Minister of Health, we're going to give so much to the Minister of... But then the problem comes, Lynette. It's one thing to allocate, it's another thing to disperse. This is where the problem starts. Yes, we can be so happy that our concerns were considered in the national budget. But does it therefore translate to the actual execution? The answer is no. We have seen it for the 2024 national budget. Parliament has approved some money to Minister of Transport. Parliament has approved money to the Minister of Social Welfare. But as of August 2023, Lynette, the Minister of Social Welfare, it was allocated a meager 6.4% of what it was approved by Parliament. And then that allocation, that was the 6% which has been allocated to it, 6% which has been given by the, is not what actually disbursement. So it means the government is not concerned about social protection. The government is not concerned about the people's dire situations. They have been promised to say, we are going to have the harmonized cash transfer system to pay for poor and affected by hunger, but nothing has been done up to date. People were being assembled, come, let's give you the net one lines, come, let's do this, but nothing has happened on the ground. We are almost approaching the new agriculture season. So it is important, Lynette, to understand the disbursement matrix of it. It's one thing to budget, it's another to disburse. That's number one. Number two, it is also important to understand how the money is going to be used, the abuse of our resources. All people pay taxes, some way or somehow. They pay taxes to government. But look, when that money is being moved from the Ministry of Finance, going to other government departments, it is supposed to be used or to go through, all expenditures are supposed to go through the public finance management system. What is it? It is a software system, an automated system. That is difficult for you to delete. You cannot delete something once you enter it, because there will be record that something has happened. Yeah. So it actually offers clear accountability, and for everyone to see how the pay has been used. But then what happens, Lynette? Go to provinces, go to districts, they're not using this system. So the ministry will spend money, will actually give out the money, but the actual accountability on how much has been used is invalid, because they are now using a manual system in those provinces to say we do all manual transactions, and once we do that, we will go back to Harare with the manual for capturing into the system. So that is a situation whereby there will be mismatches between what has been released by Treasury versus what has been used on the ground. So that breeds a situation for embezzlement of our national resources. That's number two. It's very important. So there are many issues that have to be look at the budget itself. The assumptions that the underlying assumptions for the budget are actually not credible. What do I mean? For 2025 national budget, they are saying for us we're expecting to get this much from the people, we're expecting to spend this much. That's the budget. But then they are saying we can only get that, we can only spend this if these conditions are prevailing. Those are the assumptions. Look at the assumptions. Number one, they are assuming that they are going to have a stable exchange rate. That is outrageous, of course. Doesn't make sense. Number two, they are assuming that we are going to have stable power generation. This one I laughed out my lungs yesterday. To say, what does this dinner therefore means?
When people are going over, how many hours? You leave you wake up at 5 a.m.
Yes,
there's
no electricity.
You go back home and you go to bed at 10.
No electricity.
There's no electricity, and they're saying by next year we'll have.
So it means the whole budget becomes useless because the underlying assumptions, they are meaningless. How can you say we're going to have a stable exchange rate? We are going to have stable inflation. We're not going to have stable inflation, of course.
Have they demonstrated how? You will have a stable currency and this power generation?
They always lie, of course, but you cannot lie for something that is very real. These issues of electricity, they are real issues. The issue of exchanges are real life issues. So whenever you stand in front of people to say, hey, what happened, the devaluation that happened last time is the thing of the first and the last, you're actually making a fool of yourself. Because these are real issues. People are aware. We know these cycles. They will keep on repeating. Yes.
On that note, I'd like to thank you very much, Honorable, for coming in. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but you raise very important issues that the fundamentals of a budget should be premised on the truth. That's and correct. If they are premised on lies, then that budget becomes useless. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all viewers.
There you have it, viewers. That was the Honorable Member of Parliament for Mbizo constituency, and is also the Shadow Minister for the Citizens Coalition for Change, and he was talking to us about the missing GDP figures. He says they're not missing, but then the ministry has misleading figures. He spoke to us about the national budget, the 2025 budget, and also spoke to us about the ZiG, the new currency that was introduced in April and that has since been devalued. It's backed by gold, but it has already depreciated. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much. Until next time, my name is Lynette Manzini. Goodbye.
This is Open Parley Live.